when you look at whole life insurance, how the current assumptions are built. Well, if you go back to the 80s, you're going to have a lot of pissed off people that if they sold off illustrations and the dividend rates were 12% and it showed, and you understand how, and this is a key point, that the way whole life illustrations work, the current assumptions on the far right side column for the death benefit and then the cash value, the next column over, are based on two things. First, that the company is going to pay a dividend. Okay, that one we can lock in stone. Like they've paid a dividend every single year for certain companies, 150, 160 years. Okay, cool, right? And when I say that, consecutively, never missing through all the things, through the damn Civil War, like they paid their dividends. Okay, so if you think things are going to get worse than the Civil War, come to the Dominican Republic with me and we can be friends, and you can get out. Like it'll be cool. It's not going to get worse than that, I promise. The second thing is that the dividend that's paid is at today's current assumption. Well, I got news for everybody. When I look at a whole life policy, the current assumption today in 2025 are near the lowest rates that we've had in 90 years.
Hello, Money Multipliers. Welcome back to another episode of the Money Multiplier Podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Kessler, and we ask ourselves, do our dollars make sense? So today, I have a fun and exciting episode. I don't really have too many announcements before we just hop right into it. As y'all know, the companion book has launched. So if you go to companionbook.com, grab a copy. It's for the children. And honestly, I think not even just for children, for any ages, just important life lessons. So Chris and I are very excited. It's actually up there on Amazon's #1 bestseller list. So I just want to say thank you, y'all, for helping us out and giving us all the support and the love. We see you. So in today's episode, I know this conversation has come up time and time again, but what better person to bring on to talk about IUL's Index Universal Lives than Mr. Chris Kirkpatrick from Life 180 himself. So hi, Chris. How are you doing today?
I am awesome. Can't wait for this.
And
What a setup.
I'll even tell you too, because you told me just offline, I didn't even know
Yeah,
that you have a new book that's coming out. So just real quick, plug your book.
I do. I do. Yeah. So it's been a let's just call it a passion project. It's been a birthing in the waiting for 8 years. I've got my new book, IUL Exposed, The Truth About the Most Misrepresented Product in Financial History, coming out. And I've been trying to get this book out since January, and I just keep having all these little issues. But we're really there. And I think by the time this episode is out, it's going to be launched and we're going to be live. So if you go to IULexposed.com, you can get a free copy of the book. It'll be there, and it'll be amazing. Like if you're somebody I just am a big believer. Like if you're selling this product, if you're selling IUL, if you're selling whole life, if you're looking at buying an IUL or whole life policy, I just think we owe it to ourselves to understand what we're buying. We should never put our money into something we don't understand. I think if you're a life insurance agent, you need to understand how these things work and ultimately how they work. If you're an IUL agent and you're watching this, and you need to understand all the intricacies of how IUL works, because this is all the stuff I put in this book is everything that I wish I had known when I was an IUL advocate for almost 5 years, right? And I was the director of business development for the top IUL company in the country during that time. And so this is all the stuff that I wish I had known that would have saved me, 4 years of my life. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm grateful for my experiences and so on and so forth at this point in time. But the other thing I would say is that even whole life agents, you need to understand how IUL works. I always use the example of football, like whole life. I mean, we're pretty conservative, ground and pound kind of like football strategy, right? But you have to adjust. If you know that you're going into a game, you got to know what the defense is, right? And the reality is there's so much marketing, there's so much hype, there's so much misinformation online about IUL and how it works that you need to understand what the conversation they're using is, and you need to counter that conversation. One of the fun things, if I can for 1 second, this is just going to be
Yeah.
fun. This is like my crowning moment. This shows how much of a nerd I am with this stuff, right? So my crowning moment, I this is what I do. So I have gone online, and this is the thing that really, really pissed me off. I would go to ChatGPT and I would ask it to compare whole life to IUL and which is better, and it would always choose IUL, always. Because ChatGPT, all it does is it searches the internet and it finds the information that's available. And so the fact that the information available would get people to believe that IUL was better, and the fact that there wasn't the right information available for ChatGPT to source from, was really obnoxious to me. Like it really hurt my soul. You know what I mean? And so then I went through and I did it multiple times, and I tried to get it, and it would always choose IUL. And then I tried this thing where I got ChatGPT to debate Claude AI. And I was like, I want you, ChatGPT, to be the whole life agent, and Claude be the IUL agent. And I want you to be the best agent in the world. Defend whole life. Claude, defend IUL. Go back and forth. Try to convince the other person to concede that you have the better and stronger case. And IUL always won, and it was driving me crazy. And so about a week ago, what I had done is I trained my ChatGPT. I built a custom agent, a custom GPT, where I uploaded 1,100 video transcripts. I navigated conversations with this ChatGPT agent to train it on everything I knew about whole life, IUL, the principles beyond just the technicals, but the principles that matter. And then I said, all right, I'm going to set my ChatGPT agent against the Claude IUL best agent in the world agent. And my agent got Claude to concede that whole life is the better solution for 99% of the people looking to use cash value life insurance for any reason.
That is
And
crazy.
so that's my crowning achievement right now. Because if I could do that with an unbiased, no emotion, straight logic machine that has the ability to process information better than any human on the face of the earth, that's a big win. So that's kind of like the plug. Like a lot of what I used to train this agent was all the stuff in my IUL Exposed book. And so go get the book, and you'll be as smart as, the
the
agent.
the AI. That, hey, and actually we just want to say thank you as a community for doing that. I know it probably took a lot of time,
Oh
energy,
yeah.
resources to go and put all of this together. So thank you. It's something that's just new to our
Yeah.
industry, because let's be real, IUL policies haven't been around for that long, right? Compared to whole
Right.
life,
Right.
one's a newborn baby, the other one is like a, grandfather,
Totally.
great grandfather, right?
Yep.
So this whole
Yep.
conversation I
Yep.
want to have with you, it's not to bash any products, it's just to educate the
Sure.
listeners on the crucial differences between an IUL and whole life, and especially in the context when it comes
Hmm.
to the infinite banking concept, and just preventing
Hmm.
people from unknowingly making costly mistakes. Because I have seen from firsthand, there are these big influencers that are out there, and their followers are just taking information like it's God's truth. And it's like, guys, you got
Gosh,
to think
so
for
true.
yourself, and you got to question. So,
Hmm.
where I kind of want to start with this too is, Chris, just real quick, can you just share
Yep.
your mission, or do you have real life case studies, even for yourself, for being a big advocate of IULs, to how you gotten here? What was that pivotal moment?
Well, the pivotal moment for me was as a director of business development for the top IUL company in the country. I just hit the place where I was like, this is, I had some challenges put in front of me where a person that I respected immensely challenged me on my thoughts and beliefs around IUL, and I thought he was crazy. But my mindset, and a lot of people don't know this about me, but I'm always trying to prove myself wrong. Like that's just kind of how I operate. Like I think the biggest danger in this world is confirmation bias, and that's one of the challenges in the IUL space, and that's something that I was never going to get caught up in, and I never will get caught up in it. And so to this day, this is why I do the AI stuff that I did, is because I'm always trying to prove myself wrong. And Now, I'll defend my position vehemently, but at some point in time, like you realize, okay, these changes got to be made. And so it was 2014, and I realized that everything that I was positioning IUL as was simply a half truth, and the other side of the conversation was just not being shared. And when I went to my direct upline, so to speak, the person I reported to at this company, who was the head of the career channel of distribution for the company, and I said, "Hey, this is what I've just discovered. I can't, in full integrity, be like selling and training. My job is to go around and teach all the agents in the country to do this, to like how to sell IUL." And so I was like, I'm teaching people with half truths, and that's not how I roll. Like, that's not my life. And so this is my life, my integrity on the line. And if I'm going to share this, I have no problem sharing that, but I also got to share the other side of the coin, right? I got to share the downside risk. We're selling this as upside potential, downside protection, rah, can't lose, no risk, take advantage of market opportunities. And I'm like, but that's not how it works, yet we're positioning it as this. So don't you think we're responsible to actually share the truth? This was like, and she was like, if you do that, our sales will plummet because nobody will buy that. That's not as sexy of a conversation, basically. And I'm like, well, is this a value creation game or a value extraction game? I don't know what we're playing right now, but like, I'm not really down with doing the value extraction thing. And so let's just say within 2 weeks, I was no longer at that company. And it was a really tumultuous time in my life. You know, I ended up getting in a non-compete lawsuit and then a non-disclosure. Like it was cost me a fortune. I ended up having to give up my license just to not go broke for 6 years. And I launched a marketing agency, did that. And then it was because of COVID that my marketing clients, my marketing agency, they were all in like industries that got decimated by the pandemic. And I had to stop doing that. Now, all the while, I had launched my YouTube channel. That's why a lot of people don't realize I launched my YouTube channel focusing on IUL and educating on IUL simply because I just, it was my pay it forward thing. I didn't launch my channel with an objective of building an agency or generating leads or anything like that. It was my like once a month thing where I was just trying to add value to the industry. And from end of 2015 until about 2022, I wasn't licensed. I couldn't make any money. And the funny thing was, I had all these people reaching out to me, messaging, doing all the asking for help, asking to buy policies. And I would always just have to be like, can't help you, can't help you, can't help you. Go here, go there. Here's some people I trust. And it got to the point where the IUL noise got so loud and people were asking for help. And I was like, COVID just happened. Statute of limitations ended. I could get my license again. Why don't I launch an agency and be able to help these people? And so I did, only because I had like 4 people specifically that I thought I could, really help. I could mentor. It would be a good thing. And what I can say is that thing it was October 2022 that we first launched the Life 180 agency. We started with 4 people and we just crossed 1,200 agents on the team.
Wow.
And so it just goes to show my mission, there's 2 different missions, right? The overall mission of Life 180 is to elevate consciousness with money, use money as a tool to create a life that's meaningful to you. But my personal mission, what I got is, and the reason I launched the Life 180 insurance agency was to save people from IUL. That was really now it's evolved since doing that, but really the reason that I launched Life 180 was to save people from the IUL trap.
Yeah. Because I kind of want to get into, what the biggest misconception that we hear, and you probably know this one already, and I don't even got to say it, you're already thinking about it. But a lot of people say, well, hey, there's no risk. It's guaranteed because there's this 0% floor. And, I get that some people are kind of drawn to the higher upsides, no direct market loss, that there's flexibility. That's what the consumer is thinking. And you understand though too that banking on indexes going up, let's be real, we're in the longest bull run in history and we're
Yeah.
ready for this correction. So I just
Hmm.
want to ask you, as being that expert within
Yeah.
your space, knowing way more than what I even know,
Yeah.
why will these IULs change and why can't we just say that there's no risk, that there is a 0% floor, that I can't lose my money?
Well, sure. So think about it this way. I've been doing this. I've been fighting this fight now for a decade against IUL and educating people. And I've seen this coming, and we're finally hitting that tipping point where people are waking up. Um, you just hit the nail on the head. We just came through the greatest bull run in the history of the market. Okay. Think about how IUL is sold: upside potential, downside protection. You just said it. You can't lose money. We're going to participate in the market upside through participation in the index to whatever, let's call it the S&P 500. So the S&P 500, greatest bull run, 10-year period, whatever. All right. If that's the case, that means every policy ever sold over the past decade should have outperformed the way that they were, quote unquote, conservatively illustrated, which is how they always position it.
Yeah.
I launched a thing called the IUL Challenge, and actually Chris Noggle, decided to double down with me. I was offering $5,000, and he said, "Dude, I'll match your $5,000." And so we've offered now for past year and a half, $10,000 as a reward for somebody that can show us an IUL that just matches the original illustration after 10 years. So for people that say, so this is agents fall into two categories. Either you're have been in the industry for 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 years and you don't know what you don't know, and you maybe have a mentor, or you've had a couple good years and you kind of all hyped out on this stuff, but you don't understand what it's really going to do long term. And in which case, you were exactly where I was at one point in time. And so I just want to help save you and give you the information so you can make an educated decision to make a pivot to actually serve the people that you're trying to serve. The other side of the IUL agents are people that have been doing this for 10 years. And my mindset with any IUL agent, if you've been doing this for 10 years, you're either unethical or you're a bad agent. It's one of the two. Like you're either not checking in with your clients, you're not evaluating their policies, you're not checking in, you're not, seeing how they're operating, or you are, and you see what's going on and you realize you're not selling them what you told them that you were selling them, and they're not operating the way you thought, yet you don't want to acknowledge that you're wrong. You don't want to admit it. You don't want to tell them. You don't want to actually go about doing this business the right way, and actually serving people. And you have too much money to lose in acknowledging that shift.
Yeah.
And I get it. I did the shift. It was hard. It was sucky. Like I had to have 162 conversations with clients that were the hardest conversations of my life. And I lost relationships over it with people that lost money to surrender charges. But I had to tuck the tail between my legs and say I'm sorry and admit that I made and admit that I made mistakes, and admit that I was learning, and then admit that, I was sharing information that was told to me by a massive company that I trusted. And so, I'll take my responsibility on with that. But like, as long as people knew that I didn't put them into an IUL to extract money from them, that wasn't the point. I thought I was truly serving them. I had to acknowledge that I grew, that I learned. And as soon as I had new information, I had a responsibility to share that information.
Yeah.
And that's the way I looked at it. And so that I get it. People are scared of that. IUL agents, it's the convenience of not wanting to acknowledge, because they don't want to deal with the pain in the butt that's going to come along with all the hard conversations that go with it. But at the end of the day, listen, the IUL challenge exists. We're paying $10,000. Either IUL agents have no legs to stand on, or they don't like money. It's one of the two. It's like, I don't know.
I
But
get
I
it.
know they like money, so I'm going to go with the first one.
Hi, Money Multipliers. Pardon the interruption. If it's been a while, or if you've never seen my presentation on the infinite banking concept, what I like to call the Money Multiplier method, click this link right here, themoneymultiplier.com/presentation. I'm telling you, 90 minutes of your time can completely change your family's financial future. All right, let's get back to the episode. I know, I know. And I always say over here, like within the Kessler family, I personally just don't have any IULs, just because if I thought they were so good, I would personally own one. I would never buy one, thus I would never sell one. And it's just because
Sure.
rooted within the fact that what we teach over here with the infinite banking concept, it's where
Hmm.
storing the money. I say this all the time. I'm never going to tell you how to go make your money, how to go invest your money.
Totally.
If you want to have those buddy buddy conversations, we can. I'll be here. I'll turn you on to what I'm doing, what's working out for me.
Hmm.
But the whole key point of this is that where am I storing the money at? That it's protected, the government's out of my hair, I have control, accessibility to the capital, and I can be able to use this, leverage it, because we always go back to the basics of what money is. Money's nothing more than just a means of exchange. And so I'm not
Yep.
going to go and tie my dollars into these other vehicles like an IUL. That's a whole other conversation that we could get into because some people think that the surrender value and the accumulation value in an IUL policy are one and the same, and it's not. What
No.
you have access to is the cash value that's inside of there. So it's to me, when you're creating a banking system, I want to be able to
Mm.
control the environment of where I'm leaving that money at. It's not based on hypotheticals. I really want it to be based on the predictability, the guarantees that this is going to be here no matter what that external
Yeah.
doing. I don't do anything in the markets, to be 100% honest. And I've said
Yeah,
that
neither do I.
over. Yep.
Well, I lie. I just bought a bunch of Rivian stock. That's the only thing I do. But that's not an investment advice, by the way. But so yeah, I mean, I'm with you. At the end of the day, it comes down to control. The biggest thing that drives me nuts with the whole IUL versus whole life conversation is IUL agents saying, well, if we can't use the current assumptions in our IULs, then you're not allowed to use the current assumptions. Like if we're going to focus on the guarantees and you're going to focus on the guarantees. And it's like completely apples and oranges conversation. When you look at a whole life illustration, I think one of the reasons that whole life has gained a bad reputation over the years is because there's been a lot of agents that have done the same thing and sold off illustrations. And I'm not a believer in selling off illustrations. I'm a big believer in selling off principles. I'm a big believer on educating people, helping people get clarity about where they want to go in life, what they want to create in their life, and then helping them create alignment with how they're utilizing their money to create that life. And when we look at that, we can eliminate the specific products, and we can start focusing on what are the attributes, what are the elements of these products, and what are the problems they're going to solve in our life, and how are they going to help us get to where we want to go, step by step and feature by feature. And when you look at whole life insurance, how the current assumptions are built, well, if you go back to the 80s, you're going to have a lot of pissed off people that if they sold off illustrations and the dividend rates were 12% and it showed, and you understand how, and this is a key point, that the way whole life illustrations work, the current assumptions on the far right side column for the death benefit and then the cash value, the next column over, are based on two things. First, that the company is going to pay a dividend. Okay, that one we can lock in stone. Like they've paid a dividend every single year for certain companies, 150, 160 years. Okay, cool, right? And when I say that, consecutively, never missing through all the things, through the damn Civil War, like they paid their dividends. Okay, so if you think things are going to get worse than the Civil War, come to the Dominican Republic with me and we can be friends, and you can get out. Like it'll be cool. It's not going to get worse than that, I promise. The second thing is that the dividend that's paid is at today's current assumption. Well, I got news for everybody. When I look at a whole life policy, the current assumption today in 2025 are near the lowest rates that we've had in 90 years, right? So I can look at that current assumption and have a level of confidence that I think there's actually a chance that we could perform better than that long term. However, if I went back to the 80s and say like in 1988 and it was a 12% dividend rate and I was sold that, and then I was looking at the current assumption, it was like, whoa, that looks amazing. And then over the next 30 years, it got worse and worse and worse and worse. And every year I got my statement, I was like, wait, what's going on? This thing doesn't do what I said, because people didn't understand principally how it worked, principally what role this asset was trying to play in your life. And the three most important words in personal finance are always compared to what. And when we say, all right, what is this asset trying to do for us? What problems am I trying to solve? And what would my alternative assets to be able to use, how would those be performing? And when you compare those two things, whole life wins every time. Yeah. So it's not a good or bad. It's just a lack of education When I look at that and I compare the current assumptions on IUL, well, it's a nightmare. I'll tell you, want to hear a nightmare story? I've got a client that I'm working with right now that did a 5-pay with a big IUL influencer that I won't name. Initials are DA, but did the traditional 5-pay, max funded it to the guideline level premium. Didn't understand that really the policy was never going to be paid up, but he paid $120,000 a year into this for 5 years, and now 12 years into the policy, and it was a North American policy that had a 13% cap rate when he bought it 12 years ago. Now the cap rate is 6.7%. When he illustrated the cap rate, when he illustrated the current assumption that was conservative was 7.5% on the current assumption side. Now the cap rate is lower than the current assumption was. So the best he can do on any given year is 0.8% lower than what the annual assumption was. And so this policy is getting eaten alive, even being max funded. And so the real risk for IUL is cap rate risk, is the fact that you're always at the whim of the insurance company. Now, I'm not saying insurance companies are going to try to stick it to you and hurt you. Obviously, they have to manage their reputation, and they don't do that. But I look at history and I say, all right, if you think these companies have any level of morality behind them, just go to the companies that had traditional universal life insurance policies back in the 80s and 90s. Look how they treated their clients when push came to shove and policies were lapsing and the environment changed. They're looking after themselves, and that's the purpose. When you look at insurance, I think this is really important. When we look at insurance as an asset, there's a fundamental thing we have to understand. Life insurance companies do not get big returns. That is not what they do. That is not what they excel at. They will get you the best return possible with the least amount of risk possible. That is their calling card. That is what they do. That is what they do better than any other financial institution in the world. And so set your expectations in accordance. Dividend rates are going to go up and down. They're going to chase the fixed market rates up and down. They're going to perform around what bonds perform at from a 20 to 30 year perspective. And that's what they do. It's not sexy, but it creates a lot of power and a lot of leverage and a lot of different, flexibilities that you can utilize in your personal financial life. And that's where the banking kind of stuff comes in, the infinite banking stuff comes in. And so everything in the life insurance industry is actuarially priced, whether we're talking whole life insurance or IUL. And so what I tell people is use some common sense. If you really think IUL, believe me, if anybody in the world could go into the technicals with this stuff, it's me. And I could make your head explode with all the technical reasons why, but it would be so far over the head of people that you wouldn't understand, because you got to understand this stuff so deeply. If you want to go there, get my book, it'll help. But I think you don't even need my book. I'm going to tell you some common sense things to ask yourself. And when you realize this, you're going to okay, I get it. I hope it makes sense, right? Is first and foremost, when you get a policy with a whole life policy company, a participating mutual carrier, you are effectively a shareholder of that company. You are participating in the success of that company. You are a business partner with them. So that means as long as the company is successful, your policy is successful. You will share in the success with that company. And I don't know about you. I know how you feel, Hannah. This is rhetorical. I want to partner with a company that's been doing this for 120, 130, 150, 180 years and had nothing but success. I want them to be the foundation of my financial life. That's it. And I want to trust them because they do it. They do it well. And you know that when you put your money in your whole life policy, this is going to be the case. The thing that I can't stand is all the people selling IUL being like, look, this is what Ray Kroc and Walt Disney and J.C. Penney and all these people, they did not do that. Those people used whole life, not IUL.
Bingo.
And the reason it doesn't work for IUL is because with IUL, you are not a business partner. You are a profit center. The life insurance company contractually has the ability to change things in their favor, not yours. With whole life insurance, all of the contractual benefits are towards the policyholder, not the insurance company. So I'm telling you, the way that whole life is underwritten is completely different than IUL. You'll notice a lot of people sell IUL. Why? Because it's easier to sell, because it's easier to get people through underwriting. It's easier to do all these things. I don't know about you, But one of the things that I sell my clients on, Hannah, is you want the underwriting to be hard.
Yeah.
You do.
Because you
Like,
want them to keep being profitable and keep being
right.
ethical with their underwriting.
100%.
Mm-hmm.
You like if I'm partnering with the company and their success is my success, well, I want to make sure that they're not like taking shortcuts. There's a big mutual company out there right now that I'm not going to name because I don't want to get in trouble that I'm worried is going to be the next Ohio National.
Wow.
And everybody's selling them because it's easier to get underwriting and they have all these things. But when you look at them and their balance sheet and you look at the risks they're taking on, I'm like, damn, like I would not sell this company because I don't believe in it. Like I think it's just dangerous. And this company happens to sell IUL too. So my guess is they're going to do what the company I did with, which was one of the oldest participating mutual companies that shifted to IUL. Yeah. And that's what they did. And this is what happens. So everything is actuarially priced. So in what world, think about it this way. IULs pay higher commission. They offer more flexibility. They promise higher returns, which is bullcrap, but that's what they say. They downside potential. Like in what world can you get all these things without taking on more risk? The insurance company, they can position it as all these things, but what you're doing is speculating. What you're doing is you're giving up control, and you're giving that control to the insurance company. You're giving that control to the whim of the market fluctuations and the price of the fixed markets and what the options costs go to, and all these different features that you can't control, that you probably don't understand. And if you don't understand it, you shouldn't put your money there. So I would say this to anybody, unless you're a really sophisticated options trader and you understand it, well, then you should never put your money into an IUL, period, because that's how they work. You're never in the markets. You're just participating through an index that has cap rates connected to them based on options costs and options pricing, and what the options budget is to do that. That probably makes no sense to anybody that's listening to this, or very few people.
It's always changing.
It's always
up to me.
Daily. You're not buying whole life insurance to speculate. You're not buying IUL to speculate. You're buying it to be a financial foundational asset in your life, to be the bedrock of your finances, to enhance everything else you're doing, to take back the banking function, to create opportunity funds, to do all these things. You do not want to speculate and give up control of those results. A lot of people, I think this is the biggest mistake that infinite bankers make when they try to make the argument against IUL, is they try to make it about the guarantees versus the non-guarantees. And they try to make it about, the growth versus the non-growth. Really, it's nothing to do with that. Those things come into play, but it's really about the control. It's really about the fact that the contractual element of the policy is the insurance company, you're a partner with them with whole life, and they are contractually obligated to meet those obligations, and you are participating in the success, versus with IUL, you are at the behest of the insurance company. And as the market fluctuates, you think you're protected and it looks good on the illustration, but the illustration is as good as toilet paper once you get it in force. And the bottom line is, like the example I used with this North American policy where it sold at 13% and now it's at 6.7%. And by the way, North American is selling new policies at 10%. So that's the other part that nobody talks about with IUL, is that they have the ability to reduce cap rates on old blocks of business, close those blocks down, not have to disclose, not have to market it, not have to make it public. The only way you find out is with an annual check-in with your agent and being able to address and see what the cap rates are. The statements annually are so confusing for most people, they don't understand them, so they're lost. And before you know it, it's too late, and you've lost money and you don't know what to do, and you kick yourself in the butt for it. But the bottom line is, going the whole life route puts you in the driver's seat, puts you in a position where you're partnered with the company, that you have the control, you have more flexibility than IUL agents would like to admit that you have. And that's ultimately what this comes down to. Whole life is not sexy. Whole life is not supposed to be sexy. Whole life is supposed to solve the basic financial foundation elements of your life that you can then build on. You should never take risk in a life insurance policy. You should never speculate with a life insurance policy. And that's we've lost the game. We've lost the point, I feel like. Whole life is a savings alternative. Savings, you can't lose money. IUL is not a savings alternative. It's an investment alternative, but it's just a bad one. That's it. The difference between saving and investing is you can lose money in an investment. You can't lose money in a savings alternative. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that IUL is not an investment alternative. It is.
Yeah,
It's just a bad investment alternative when you break it down. But whole life is the best savings alternative that exists on the face of the earth. So let's just stop having these conversations and trying to market IUL against whole life. IUL should be marketed against just all these other assets, and whole life should be marketed against bonds and CDs and savings accounts and all these different things. And I got a video coming out today that we're filming this.
yeah,
You should go watch it. You should go watch it. It's all about comparing whole life to CDs, bonds, and I did a whole spreadsheet breakdown after taxes. Whole life wins every time. Like if you think about the billions of dollars sitting in CDs, bonds, high yield savings accounts, money market accounts, all these things, all that money, if it were in whole life insurance, generations of families would be shifted and altered in a positive way.
I agree. I agree. And it kind of gets into as well, like the last topic I want to talk about with you, because I know
Yep.
you have the wealth of knowledge here with this. It is
Cool.
just the renewal cost of the insurance.
Yeah.
I think a
Okay.
lot of people don't understand that, when I look at these guaranteed side of these IUL contracts, that those things can go all the way down to zero. The death benefit can get depleted, the cash value
Yep.
can get depleted. And here's just my opinion on it when I say this, like in the fifth grade education type of style. But
Mm-hmm.
if I want to go and participate in the markets, I will go to the markets directly. Why am I trying to tie a renewal cost of insurance into my investment portfolio? It shouldn't
Totally.
be that way. And me
Totally.
being an educator within this space, I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to have those conversations with my clients when they are 75 years old and I got to call little Miss Mary Smith over the phone and say, "Hey, Mary Smith, I'm so sorry to tell you, but if you don't pay X amount and more in premium this year, you're
Horrible.
going to lose this policy that you put boatloads and boatloads of money into up to this point." So
Totally.
I think that's a very big difference when we're comparing the product to product, because honestly, Chris, I just love how you frame your mindset around, hey, I don't want to compare illustrations. I don't want to compare product to product. We got to go back to the basic principles. But when we do get into just comparing the apples to oranges,
Mm.
why I'm a huge believer within the whole life is that it's got that fixed cost of the insurance. Where over here with the IULs, I don't
Mm.
have that. I have that renewal cost that's going up and up.
Well, not only that, but like this is the challenge with whole life insurance. There's all sorts of different chassis depending on the company that you go with, depending on the product that you choose at said company. There are companies where they have products that will be fully paid up at age 65. Some companies are fully paid up at age 75. Some products are fully paid up at age 95. Some products are paid all the way to 121, right? Like so, it varies how you design the policy, what product you decide to use for your client, and what product as a person looking to do this for yourself you choose needs to be in alignment with what your goals and objectives are, right? Some people, it makes sense to get the L95 policy that you paid at 95 years old because of the fact that maybe you're an entrepreneur, maybe you are a real estate investor, you're going to have the cash flow and you can pay those premiums all the way through. Nelson Nash would say, pay for as long as you can. Some people, that's just not realistic, right? Like your cash flow is going to dry up. And I just personally believe that you should never have an obligation beyond when your cash flow is going to dry up because that's going to become a stress point. And at the same time, nobody has a crystal ball. So at some point in time, with all whole life policies, you always have the option to what's called reduce, pay up the policy. And that is a level of flexibility and strategy that you can mitigate risk because even if I had an L95 or L120 policy, I could say, all right, 66 years old, I'm out of cash flow. I'm going to reduce the death benefit, fully pay it up. And this thing's going to be a bank account on steroids at this point in time. It's going to be amazing. And that's awesome. You cannot understate the power in that flexibility when you compare that to IUL, because IUL operates completely differently. It's on what's called an annual renewable term chassis. Now, what does that mean? That means every single year you have a 1-year expense for the term for whatever the net amount at risk is on the policy. Let's say it's $500,000. Well, if I'm 65, well, the next year I'm going to be 66, and that gets more expensive because the $500,000 1-year policy gets more expensive. You can never pay up a policy with IUL. Never. It can never be fully paid up. And so then what happens is by the time you're 80, that 1 year annual renewable term gets really expensive. Now, all IUL agents out there, I'm going to just address this because this is going to be all the comments, all the trolls, IUL agents are going to be commenting. The goal is to reduce the corridor and make the net amount at risk be less and this and that, whatever. Okay, that's the goal. Life doesn't exist on a spreadsheet. I'll say that it's great that you philosophically want to do that. And if you do that, it reduces the risk. I'm not going to dispute that. However, let's say we bring the $500,000 net amount at risk down to $100,000 by the time we're 80. The annual cost of that insurance is still going to be probably 50% of whatever the life insurance is, maybe 40% of whatever the life insurance. So $40,000 a year for $100,000 of net amount at risk. That's a big expense when it's probably like a 3 to 4% expense on the total cash value of the policy. And then when you take into consideration the fact that these policies are only as good as them being there for the reasons that we have them when we need them the most. And when we're going to need them the most realistically is when we're 60, 70, 80, 90 years old, right?
And our graduation date.
100%. And the bottom line is how we utilize these is essential in retirement, using it as a volatility buffer, using it for all these things and having the death benefit on the back end. This is important, whether it's living benefits. I'm a big believer in living benefits and utilizing and having this, this there to kind of protect us and have control of our medical directive and medical alternatives. I share the story about my father-in-law who had stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and we accelerated his death benefit to pay for alternative treatments, $250,000 out of pocket. They gave him a 90-day window to live with a 7.5 centimeter tumor on his pancreas spread to his liver. He's still alive 4.5 years later.
Wow.
Because of alternative treatments and because of the living benefits on his life insurance that he never would have been able to afford or prioritized without it, right? So like you can't understate the value of that. Those benefits are only as good as being there and the policy being in force. And I know that when I want to use money, and this is the last thing I'll say, when you look at most people buy IUL for tax-free income retirement, that's the purpose. But the thing with that is when you look at the tax-free retirement, you're using, for the most part, index loans. And there's, let's call them 5 to 6% on the index loans. So that means every year that the index, let's say I built up over a 10-year period, $100,000 a year, I'm probably going to have an outstanding loan balance of 1.4 million, something like that, because the loans compound against you. Now, they show in the illustrations positive 50 basis points of arbitrage. So the cash value is growing faster than the actual loan amount, but that's not how it works. Let's just say I show people this all the time. I could show 30 years of positive growth in a policy, and then 10 years into retirement, I've taken income for 10 years. Now I've got this loan. If there's 2 bad years in the market, now all of a sudden I've got this extra 6% fee of this loan cost that has to come out of the cash value in the policy to pay that loan cost, because it doesn't just go away. So now all of a sudden I can show people, and I've shown this, I've got videos that do this, that show you with a 0% year in retirement, when you have outstanding loans, you can have a 20% loss of the cash value in your policy.
Yeah.
So the real risk with IUL isn't early. This is where people that sell IUL and people that buy into the concept
want them to focus on.
They get you to focus on it. Todd Langford from Truth Concepts taught me a concept. He calls it paltering, where it's like they don't lie to you. They just get you to focus on the wrong thing to convince you. Right? It's a very political thing to do. It's like, think about all the political debates you've ever watched, right? Like Donald Trump's the best at it too. Like, I mean, I love him, but like, you ask him a question. A lot of times he doesn't even answer the question. He's just like goes off on this tangent, of this thing. And you're like, yeah, that's a good point, but it wasn't even the question. You know what I mean? Like, but all politicians do it. And that's what IUL agents do. Like, you ask them about all these things, and they're going to be like, no, look at the first 20 years and like the cost of insurance is lower. Well, like, no, like you're not buying this policy for 20 years. You're buying it for your life. So what is the life expense of this policy? Right. And I'm a big believer of running all of my decisions through a simple filter. And that simple filter is this: what's the upside? What's the downside? Can I live with the downside? And so I encourage everybody to think about this. Look at the IUL on the upside. That's great. In a bubble, if it worked, cool. It'd be amazing. It doesn't work that way. So, okay, the upside is great. It's irrelevant though, because when you look at the downside of an IUL and you look at how bad it can be, you have to ask yourself, if the downside happens, could you live with it? And for 99% of the people that would buy them, the answer is absolutely not. And while I'll admit that the guaranteed element of the policy for an IUL is unlikely to happen, the truth is that it's going to be somewhere between the midline assumption on the illustration and the guaranteed assumption. That's where these things are really going to fall. So if you show the policy lapsing on a guaranteed level at 70 years old and then the midline assumption lapsing at 84, I say split the difference and say, would I be comfortable if with this policy lapsing at 77 years old? If the answer is no, it's not for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, and you actually brought up some good points, because I was going to ask you, as my last and final thought is, what some people who are talking with IUL agents and looking at the
Yep.
products that are out there, because there's a whole bunch of different permanent products out there within the life
Yep.
insurance industry. And
Yep.
those three questions that you just gave us was beautiful. I was even thinking about, hey, ask the question, are there any guarantees? Can this policy lapse? What could cause this policy to lapse? And then finally, and this is just my opinion on it, I would say, is this designed for infinite banking, or is it just sold under that name? And go look at page 39 of Nelson Nash's book, and there's your answer that you'll find.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I mean, like that's the thing is like all these IUL agents, they think they do infinite banking. They don't even know what infinite banking is. They've never read the book. And listen, I mean, I'm not as like hardcore infinite banking as you are even. And, I love it and I love the principles, but there I just think it's like these people, they don't even understand infinite banking. They've never read the books. They've never done the education. They're not practicing this themselves, like for the most part. Because if they were, they'd realize it doesn't work. Like that's the reality. And so they're selling on theory, they're selling on illustrations, they're selling on all these things that look really good on paper. And what they're doing is they're leveraging trust from these insurance companies because people don't believe that insurance companies would be deceptive. But I got news for you. If you look at the IUL regulations and how they've changed, and I can end with this for you, is just think about. I equate it to the the FBI chasing Capone back in the day. It took him forever to get caught. They chased him for a decade. You know what I mean? And they could never catch up to him because the FBI had to operate by a set of rules and standards, and they couldn't take shortcuts. And Capone, every time he found out they were catching on to him, he had this ability to adjust and pivot, and he didn't give a crap what anybody said. He's a private company. He could do whatever he wants. He didn't have to follow federal regulation. And so regulators are doing the same thing with IUL. 2015, the end of the Wild West happened, so to speak, with IUL. And they said, okay, these illustrations are out of control, so we have to create regulation AG 49. AG 49 set in place a set of rules that was supposed to make it so IUL illustrations were restricted on kind of outlandish upside that they were presenting. The problem is, as soon as they did that, within months, all these companies came out with different ways to get around the new regulation to still make their illustrations show really well, even though they would never perform. So there's a lack of good faith in the nature and the way IULs are sold. AG 49A came out in 2020 to counter that. So notice it took 5 years for them to create a new regulation to adjust for the changes that these companies made in 2 months, right? 5 years. And so then December 2020, that's when AG 49 came out. And then finally, May of 2023 or 2024, May of 2024, AG 49B came out. So it took 4 more years after that one to come out with a new one. And so the question, and then immediately, once again, within months, they're constantly making these shifts. So there's no morality. These companies don't give a crap about you and your cash value and you and reaching your goals. IUL is literally, it's got a place. Don't get me wrong. If you find and you utilize it for just a death benefit play, and you use guaranteed insurability riders, and you kind of function them and you're a high net worth person that wants to take a small portion and do this, I've sold a couple IULs with that purpose because there's a little more leverage. You can get a little more death benefit than you can with whole life. And if you have the guaranteed riders, that's the key. And you're never willing to touch, and you're willing to never touch the cash value, and those riders are in place, well, then that's cool. But you got to be super high net worth. You got to have this part of a bigger plan. And let's face it, for most people, that's just not where Americans are. And so that's why it's not the best fit. These are just the things that you have to realize. If IULs were so moral and they were so good and they were so conservative, they wouldn't constantly be being chased down by the regulators by changing all these illustration rules. And I go into great detail about this in my book, about how this is all worked out. So you can check it out if you want to be a big nerd about it, like me.
Yes. And I would just encourage the listeners, slow down before you sign, get yourself educated.
Yeah.
So just take a pause, take a breather for a second, because I can say this from being from the Gen Z generation. We have a very big now mentality. I call it the drive-through mentality or the microwave mentality. Things just got to get like yesterday. So just
Yeah.
down a little bit, especially when it comes to your money, your finances, and protecting your warehouse of your wealth.
Yeah.
So real quick, Chris, so the IUL challenge, for any folks who do want to participate, they will reach out directly. Do you send you an email? How do they get in contact?
Yeah, they can email Chris at life180.com. All I need is the in-force illustration, and then I need the original illustration. And the in-force illustration just has to be 10 years in and just has to show the current cash matches the way it was sold 10 years ago. And coming through the greatest bull run of all time, it should be a no problem. But I can tell you, I've had over 2 million views on videos trying to push this, and not one person's been able to do it yet. I have a lot of people that message and comment are like, "Oh, no problem. I got this and not I got that." And like nobody, it's just all noise. They're just trying to make it sound good, and nobody ever follows through with it because they don't have it, and that's it. So that's that. And
Thank you.
I've done that on Instagram and YouTube and all the things, and nobody does. Nobody wins.
Well, I appreciate you for coming on, sharing your expertise. I'm
You
going
got
to
it.
link everything down below, how to
Cool.
access your book, how to get in contact with Chris if you do want to talk with him. And then also, Chris and I have a mutual friend, Mr. Garrett Gunderson. If y'all reach out to me, here's
Yeah.
a gift to y'all. I don't do this a whole lot. I don't think I've ever done it on my podcast show. But if you send me an email, I will send you a copy of the ebook that Chris Noggle and I have a forward in for What Would the Rockefellers Do? Because I know Garrett's been going in. It's either in What Would the Rockefellers or Killing Sacred Cows, where he had to add an component for the IUL conversation because he was learning that some IUL people were using the book to sell it, right?
I'll take credit for that. I'm the one who made him rewrite this book, by the way.
Good.
Like I was doing a video with him and I was like, "You realize everybody's using your book to sell IUL?" And he's like, "No, they're not." And I'm like, "Oh yeah." And I pulled up videos and I showed him and he's like,
Mhm.
"No, that's not good. I got to redo this book." And so that's what he did. So it's cool.
Well, thank you, man. Thanks for coming on. We appreciate
Thank you.
you. So I hope y'all enjoyed that episode. I mean, Chris Kirkpatrick is just a wealth of information when it comes to the differences of whole life, index universal life. He just really understands the deep internal buildings of what that product truly is, especially because he was a gentleman who used to sell it for some time until it kind of went against his morals, his ethics, and his fiduciary responsibility, in my opinion. So I want to say thank you, Chris, for coming on the show. It was a pleasure. And for all of y'all, just a reminder too, send me an email, podcast@themoneymultiplier.com. I'll send you a copy of the ebook, What Would the Rockefellers Do?, where Chris Noggle and I have our forward within that book. And it kind of gets into IUL policies as well and why we don't want to use it to create a family banking system. So this is my last PSA. Mimic and imitate what the elite and the wealthy families have been doing for generations and decades, because I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I just want to copy what the wealthy are out there doing. So hopefully y'all found a lot of knowledge around this. It was insightful. And again, I'm not here to bash any products. Do what is good for you, because just like how in The Psychology of Money, written by Morgan Housel, how he talks about about that my financial strategy may not work for you, your financial strategy may not work for your neighbor or the gentleman or the paper boy down the street. So just do what works for you. As always, I'm here every week, every Tuesday, releasing a new episode. So thank you, Money Multipliers. And again, just a big thank you for all of the love and the support when it comes to the companion book that Chris Naugle and I wrote together. I love you. I will see y'all next week. Mwah! Bye, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to another episode. Hey, if you liked this content, click right here. It will take you to last week's episode. I'm here every single Tuesday. I'll catch you Money Multipliers next week. See you then.